Alexis Sharkey was born in Houston, Texas in the year 1994 to her father, Mike Robinault, and her mother, Stacy. After graduating high school, Alexis initially studied biology education at a university in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but after gaining her diploma, she seemed to be in no rush to get a teaching job and found work at a premium hair and skincare company named Monat. She was still working for Monat when she began to gain a great number of followers on the photography-based social media app Instagram. A combination of her natural beauty and her champagne lifestyle had users hooked. She and her husband, a wealthy West Texas consultant who was 26 years her senior, were accustomed to vacationing a lot, and Alexis wasted no opportunity to document her travels, sharing pictures with her followers on a daily basis. Not to mention sharing images of the couple's extravagant life around Houston, the place that they'd made their home. Her posts would be seen, liked, and shared by tens of thousands of people, and by December of 2020, Alexis had over 69,000 followers. Now, as you may know, Instagram users with large amounts of followers are often contacted by private companies and offered large amounts of money in exchange for advertising their products, and Alexis was no different. Within a relatively short period of time, whilst still working full-time selling products for Monat, which has since been accused of being nothing more than a multi-level marketing company, Alexis was getting sponsorship deals which made her income swell to even higher levels than her consultant husband. But all was not well in the Sharkey home. A close friend of Alexis confessed that she had recently confided in her that she was filing for a divorce. Some had always doubted their relationship given that Tom was considerably older than her, and aside from an intense attraction, the couple seemed to have very little in common. Yet for some reason, Alexis didn't move out of the apartment they shared, even though she and Tom were apparently separated. However, she did see an opportunity to get a breakaway from Tom, as Thanksgiving weekend gave her the chance to stay over at a friend's place for the celebrations. She told her soon-to-be ex-husband that she would be back by the weekend, but on the Saturday following Thanksgiving, Alexis's mother, Stacy, received a call from Tom saying that Alexis was missing, and that he hadn't heard from her since Friday. A few days later, on November 28th, Alexis's mother posted to the social media site Facebook, stating that her daughter hadn't been heard from in over 24 hours, adding that police were involved and that Alexis had last been seen in the Houston area. This was especially concerning for Stacy, as she hadn't seen her daughter since the previous Christmas due to travel restrictions caused by the pandemic. Alexis had planned to return home to her parents back in Pennsylvania for Thanksgiving, but as the number of cases continued to rise all over the United States, the family decided it was much safer for Alexis to stay in Texas. But that very same morning that Stacy posted her plea on Facebook, a sanitation worker employed by the city of Houston saw something unusual lying on the side of the road. At first, he simply believed it was some kind of mannequin, due to the lack of clothes and the stiff positioning of the thing's limbs. But the worker's supervisor, a man named John Richardson, later said that the employee had sounded terrified when he called him, saying he'd noticed the apparent mannequin looked a little too real upon closer inspection, and that he suspected the situation to be far worse. John drove down to where the supposed mannequin was lying at the side of the road, then rushed to call 911 when he saw that it was no mannequin at all. That it was in fact a lifeless human body. The moment of realization traumatized him, and he later told a local radio station that the sight of the body had been playing in his head every day since he discovered it. 2 days later, on November 30th, Houston Police Department held a press conference in which they announced that they had identified the body as belonging to none other than Alexis Sharkey. Her soon-to-be ex-husband got a call from a local coroner's office, asking him to drive over to identify the body of a potential loved one. He knew immediately that it was going to be Alexis, but somehow found the strength to head on over, where he found her lying on a mortician's table, dead but with no obvious signs of injury. Yet to his horror, after the news of Alexis's death began to circulate in the news, he began to hear rumors that it was his maltreatment of her that had been the cause of her death. Anonymous accounts from people claiming to be friends of Alexis had told a number of online news publications that the separation from her husband had caused a huge amount of tension in their home, a tension that had soured into hatred. These anonymous friends claimed that Alexis herself had told them that some intense arguments had descended into violence more than once, and that her husband had been putting his hands on her. Suddenly, Tom Sharkey found himself bathed in the media spotlight, and for entirely negative reasons. In what became a lightning-quick trial by media, one which was fueled by social media speculation, tens of thousands of furious people assumed that it was Tom that was the murderer, and he began to receive a slew of death threats. It certainly didn't help that initially Tom had refused to comment on his wife's death, but as the threats against him became more and more tangible, he reached out to give a statement to a local ABC affiliate. "She understood me. I understood her. We didn't fight when she left. I just told her she shouldn't drive under the influence," he said, overtly implying that Alexis had been drunk the night that she left her friend's Thanksgiving celebrations. He also seemed to insist that there was no trouble in their marriage, and that they weren't filing for divorce at all. This was something that was backed up by Alexis's mother, who said her daughter would have told her if she was suffering marital problems. When the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences conducted an autopsy on Alexis's body, they told reporters that they couldn't rule out the possibility of foul play. This only cemented her mother's suspicions that she met a violent end. "I believe solely that she was murdered because of the manner in which her body was left," Stacy said. "It just drives deep into the soul that something very malicious happened here, and I want to get to the bottom of it." Friends said she confided in them on a recent trip to Mexico that she feared for her life, although she apparently did not say why she held such suspicions. But if this was the case, just who exactly killed Alexis? Police seem to have pretty much ruled out the idea that she was murdered by her husband, since he was quick to volunteer his cooperation with them in the aftermath of her death, and has since stated that they believe it to be only a matter of time before arrests are made. So perhaps Alexis's murder was related to her career selling beauty products of Monat. Not only has Monat been accused of utilizing the techniques of outlawed, multi-level marketing companies, but the quality of its products has also come into question. In the year before Alexis's death, Monat was allegedly investigated by Florida's Attorney General after hundreds of claims that its products caused a host of hair and skin issues. The company was permanently barred from using false or misleading statements in its marketing and sales of its beauty products, and faced $1 million fine on top of class action lawsuits from those that, after using the products, claimed they experienced hair loss, balding, and itching. Alexis was a prolific seller of Monat's products, once receiving a check for $10,000 as the winner of a company sales competition. That would certainly make for a lot of women who might blame her for essentially disfiguring them. There's also a decent chance that since Monat's MLM tactics would leave a lot of people out of pocket, that somewhere down the line Alexis had screwed one of her underlings out of a great deal of cash, perhaps just before the news of Monat's subpar products broke in the media, perhaps leaving a person totally unable to shift a hefty amount of stock they'd purchased. This would doubtless leave a person angry, vengeful, maybe even murderous. And besides, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. If this is indeed the case, and Alexis's death is intrinsically linked to her Monat sales, then it seems that her status as an Instagram influencer actually led to her murder. The influence she exerted over those that followed her no doubt led to increased sales, thus increasing the potential pool of victims for Monat's frankly dangerous products. It's very possible that without Instagram, she may not have made the sale to that one person unhinged enough to seek revenge when their skin began to blister, or their hair began to fall out, or their scalp began to itch unbearably. It seems we'll soon find out who's responsible for Alexis's death. But if it is related to social media, it would be very ironic that a medium that has brought opportunity and new beginnings to so many brought one young woman to her end. The 24-year-old Russian Ekaterina Karaglonova had a life that many of us can only dream of having. She was young, beautiful, intelligent, and highly educated. Practicing medicine as a dermatologist after graduating from the Pirogov Medical University, she also held a residency at a prestigious medical school in Russia's capital, Moscow. And to top it all off, she had recently finished second place in a Moscow beauty pageant. Ekaterina was also a prominent social media personality in her native Russia, regularly sharing images of herself with hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers. Known by the handle @Katie_loves_life, she was known to write a blog detailing her luxurious jaunts around Europe, where she posed in locations such as Italy, Austria, and Spain. In her last Instagram photo shows her lounging poolside in Greece, detailing her love for international travel. It was very helpful for a few days to escape from heavy rains and cold to the Ionian Sea. She also captioned the snap of herself holding a glass of wine by a pool. Now I prefer to travel very often, but briefly, study and work do not let go. But the impressions of such short trips remain the most vivid. But one of her close friends, Marina Nikotina, began to notice that all was not well with her seemingly perfect life. She claimed to have observed a drastic change in Ekaterina's behavior during the summer of 2019, and when questioned on it, the well-traveled young doctor confessed that she had made a rather dangerous enemy and that someone is interested in my private life in the worst possible way. Then, in July of 2019, Ekaterina's family contacted the Moscow police, concerned with the fact that they had not heard from her in several days. Friends remarked that she had recently started a new relationship and had been planning a trip to the Netherlands to mark her birthday on July 30th. Most other people might have been busy with travel arrangements or might simply have been too occupied with their actual vacation to get in touch. But as we know, Ekaterina posted to her Instagram account almost religiously, and the fact that she hadn't done so for several days was the thing that alarmed her family the most. Deeply worried for her well-being, Ekaterina's family contacted her landlord, who, after some convincing, allowed them to access her apartment. There they found no sign of anything amiss. Her belongings seemed to be all in order and there was no obvious signs of violence. But in the hallway was a heavy-looking suitcase, stuffed with something far more than just expensive clothes. Her family were horrified at what they found when they opened it, because what fell out in front of them was Ekaterina's decomposing corpse. She had been dead for almost a week, with a large slash across her throat and several other devastating stab wounds to her chest and abdomen. Upon examining the crime scene, police were unable to locate any obvious murder weapon, and there were no signs that there had been a break-in or any kind of serious struggle. Naturally, police checked her Instagram account for any clues that might point them in the direction of why she was killed. They saw that Ekaterina had alluded to a potential romance on her Instagram account, sharing photos of bouquets with notes attached to them. "Another surprise from Mr. X," she captioned the latest photo, adding, "For several weeks now I have been receiving bouquets and little notes from a secret admirer. I wonder who it could be." It was then speculated that such a public display of romantic interest could have angered a former lover, perhaps someone that couldn't bear to see the young doctor in a new relationship. Police then discovered CCTV footage had captured an ex-boyfriend of Ekaterina's who seemed to have paid her apartment a visit in the few days before contacting her became impossible. Ekaterina had only broken up with 32-year-old Maxim Geryeva a few weeks prior, and she had confided in friends that he had not taken it very well at all, and that he was a wolf. The man enters the Moscow apartment block wearing a baseball cap, apparently to cover his face from CCTV cameras. He is then seen leaving the apartment around 4 hours later, wearing a completely different outfit, which police speculated was because the one he'd entered wearing was now covered in blood. Police soon caught up with Maxim, who told police that the breakup had been hard on him, with Ekaterina repeatedly insulting and humiliating him, despite the fact that he had given her a sizable amount of money in the course of their relationship. Maxim said that she had told him he was ugly and that even a plastic surgeon could not help him. Before they parted, Ekaterina allegedly told him that it would have taken a year before he could save up enough money for them to meet again. This had given rise to theories that the young doctor had taken to resorting to a kind of selling of herself in order to fuel her extravagant lifestyle, charging men exorbitant amounts of money to go on dates with her. It was then that Maxime confessed that he could not stand the kind of treatment and had snapped. He then confessed that he stabbed Ekaterina in the neck and chest area with a knife at least 5 times, saying he regretted what happened and promised to cooperate with the investigation. She half turned and I struck her in the neck, he says in a recorded confession to Moscow police. She tried to escape to the bathroom and lock the door. I pulled her out of the bathroom. Her blood was dripping down her body. Then in the corridor she started screaming. I covered her mouth and stabbed her again in her chest with the knife. She then ran to the living room and started fighting me, but I was in a state that I didn't feel any pain. During the fight, she fell down and I struck her twice again in the neck. Then she had convulsions and died. Maxime was taken to trial for the murder, and he apparently held his face in his hands in court because he looked bad. Such was the depth of his own vanity. Character witnesses alluded to calling him Ken, a reference to the Barbie doll because he was so obsessed with plastic surgery and his overall appearance. Maxime insisted the murder was not premeditated and told the courtroom it was a spur-of-the-moment thing, something that came about as a result of the rage that he was feeling that Ekaterina had so deeply insulted him and his looks. I want to apologize to Katya's parents. I am very sorry, he told the Instagram influencer's family before he was taken to a prison outside of Moscow. It seems that the world of Instagram influencers, as well as those who are attracted to its veneer of perfection, are just as prone to becoming victims of its vapid plastic culture as we are. Here was an accomplished young woman who apparently could not bear to be without the trappings of luxury that she evidently felt she was entitled to, who, as a result, involved herself with a man who she believed was so beneath her that she could verbally abuse and shame him publicly with no repercussions. In no way did Ekaterina deserve to die for what she did, but in delving into the superficial lifestyle of an Instagram influencer, what's clear is that she opened up a kind of Pandora's box that seems to have set her on the path to ruin. When 20-year-old Sinead McNamara from New South Wales, Australia, received a job offer to work aboard the super yacht known as the Mayan Queen 4, she saw it as the opportunity of a lifetime. So much so that the Australian part-time model sold almost every single one of her belongings to be able to afford a plane ticket to Europe. She was offered the job partly because she had experience working on similar vessels, but the $190 million luxury boat was by far the most extravagant she'd ever had the opportunity to sail on. It was owned by Mexico's second richest man, billionaire Alberto Bayeres, and it was his home on the high seas as he traveled around Europe, living a life of pure luxury. In August of 2018, the Mayan Queen was sailing around the plethora of Greek islands in the Aegean Sea, and Sinead took full advantage of the gorgeous scenery, amassing around 20,000 followers on her Instagram account. Sinead posted plenty of pictures of herself too, and it's plain to see why the young lady was able to gain work as a part-time model, not to mention how it doesn't take a genius to work out why photographs of a beautiful young blonde surrounded by beautiful Greek vistas attracted so many visitors to her page. But despite presenting an image of a perfect carefree existence, it became obvious to some that the life Sinead was living was far from flawless. At one point, the young woman called her mother back in Australia to complain that she had been involved in an intense argument with another crew member working aboard the Mayan Queen, and that she seemed scared for her safety. The very next day, a passing boat spotted the Australian model hanging from the back of the yacht, tangled up in a series of thick ropes. The crew of the Mayan Queen was alerted, and the captain of the boat, who asked not to be named, said he discovered Sinead's body at around 1:45 a.m. and began screaming for help. Doctors and police tried for around half an hour to revive her, but when she began to slip into a coma, she was rushed to an Athens hospital, but she sadly died in the helicopter that was flying her to the mainland. The man that inspected her body, Greek coroner Ilias Bogiokis, ruled that because of the circumstances in which she died, that he initially speculated that Sinead's death was actually her ending it herself. Since no stimulant drugs such as cocaine or sedatives such as cannabis or heroin had been found after the toxicology analysis, it means that the girl was not under the influence of such substances, he said. She had mental clarity and that she was most likely facing social problems and found herself at a psychological impasse. However, we don't know if someone brought her into this situation, if there was a moral instigator. The coroner also made it clear that questions still remained about the case, and would need to know much more about the events which led up to her hanging to make a clear, definitive judgment on how and why Sinead died. What's horrifying to hear, though, is that Sinead's body was in such a state that the coroner advised her family against viewing her body, even though this is standard practice to identify a person's remains. What was so messed up about her corpse that Greek authorities might forgo such a crucial part of the identification process? After an initial investigation by the Greek Coast Guard, the Mayan Queen 4 was then allowed to leave Kefalonia after interviews with the yacht's crew. The Mayan Queen 4 is equipped with CCTV surveillance cameras, and footage of the incident was seized by Greek authorities. Footage reportedly showed Sinead moments before her body was found, though the video was not made public, and for some reason it wasn't made available to the coroner either. The footage apparently showed Sinead in a very high spirits before her body was found hanging from the back of the boat, that she was dancing on tables and downing cocktails, hardly the frame of mind someone who is about to take their own life. If this is the case, our attention is then drawn to the argument with the other crew members, the same one she complained to her mother about, in which she confessed to being scared. Was Sinead's murder covered up by somebody who co-opted the Greek authorities into helping them sweep the events that preceded her killing under the rug? It's not entirely out of the question that Alberto Baleares, who is worth around $10 billion, would have the financial means to bribe government officials in a country so strapped for cash as Greece. Perhaps even more terrifying than the concept of some murderous conspiracy is the casual indifference with which her death was treated by people online. You live for attention, now you've got it, while another added, unfortunately the steep price you pay with lifestyles like this. But some have insisted there is plenty of evidence to suggest that her death was indeed her taking her own life. In a cryptic Instagram post written just 2 weeks before she died, Sinead wrote, "My head is all over the shop today," along with emojis of a volcano, a tornado, and a needle with blood dripping from it. There was also many who asserted that Sinead had ended a tumultuous romantic relationship a short time before her death, and that this may have contributed to feelings of depression or self-destruction. Her death also occurred on what was reported to be her last day as a crew member on the yacht, raising the question that perhaps she was so depressed to be leaving the lap of luxury, maybe even being forced to return to Australia because there was no more luxury yacht jobs available to her, that she opted to take her own life instead of biting the bullet and return to a life more ordinary, perhaps. And perhaps this is the most terrifying thing of all, that human beings are capable of reaching such height that we're simply unwilling to go on living if we can't continue to live in the way we've become accustomed to. That there's a possibility that at just 20 years old, Sinead had felt she'd peaked, and that everything else to follow in her life would pale in comparison to the time that she spent on the Mayan Queen. So instead of continuing her life with her days on the yacht becoming a happy, albeit distant memory, Sinead may have chosen to end her life in order to, as the saying goes, die young and leave a good-looking corpse.
My name is Shelly, and 10 years ago, I wanted to make my own money because I was tired of asking my parents for money. I put in a lot of applications and I ended up getting hired at Chick-fil-A. I'm not going to lie, I was definitely excited because of all of the chicken nuggets I was going to be eating. Anyways, after I got hired, I started to get the hang of the job. It was pretty easy. I worked outside in the drive-thru line a lot because we were the busiest fast food restaurant in our town, and people really liked my personality. After working there for a few months, my dad's creepy friend Tyler would come there every day at the same time and go to the same drive-thru line, which was weird because I worked there after school and there were 2 drive-thru lines. The drive-thru line he'd always go to was mine, and he would always call me Shell Shell, which I've hated since I was a small kid. The thing is, he'd always order small stuff like a small fry or a small cookies and cream milkshake. A few times he came into the line, pull up to me, and then he'd say that he forgot his debit card, and he would just try and talk to me. I'm not dumb. I knew exactly what he was doing. Ever since I turned 13, he always acted weird toward me, telling me that I'm growing up into a woman, or that I look like a young woman now. There was this time when my parents were having a get-together with family and friends, and I yelled out to my parents that I had to pee, and I ran upstairs. I swear, a few seconds later, Tyler burst through the door, looked at me and said, "Wow," and stared at me. Then he straightened up real quick and said, "Sorry, my bad," and closed the door. Like I said, he was weird. So we closed at 10 p.m., but we always take orders up until around 9:59. One day, we were inside cleaning up, and it was around 10:30 p.m. There were about 5 or 6 of us in Chick-fil-A at the time. I was mopping the floor, and a few of us saw a car pull up to the drive-thru, but turned around at the entrance because we put cones out there after 10 p.m. The car drove around our parking lot at least 10 minutes, and I noticed that it had temporary tags on it. After a while, our manager went outside and went up to the car due to it stopping in front of one of our windows every time it drove around. I watched the manager walk to the car as the driver rolled down the window. The window was all the way down before my manager reached the car, and to my surprise, it was Tyler, my dad's friend. He had a new car that I didn't recognize, but what made this very weird was that even when he rolled the window down, he never looked at my manager. He was staring directly at me, talking with my manager. I was standing behind the entrance door. He saw me looking at him, looking at me, but he never turned away like a normal person would. My manager walked back in and told me and my coworkers to hurry up so we can get out of here. I was the last person to get done with my closing, so it was just me and my manager. My manager told me to make sure the doors are locked. I told him okay, then I went to the bathroom. I figured I'll lock them once I'm done. As usual, I was on my phone while using the bathroom, and the bathroom door opens. I thought it was weird because my manager is the only other person in the building, and he's a guy. I yelled out that he's an idiot and he's in the wrong bathroom, but the thing is, he never left. It got weirder because I can hear him breathing by the door, but then I heard, "Shell Shell, it's me, Tyler Poop. Are you in here?" I picked up my feet so he couldn't see them, but then he started to push open every stall door, saying my name. I texted my boss and it literally said, "Help, bathroom." Then Tyler got to my stall. He attempted to push the door open and then he laughed. He said that he knows that I'm in there. He looked in the crack of the door and said, "There you are." He then got down on his hands and knees, reached his hand under the door and attempted to unlock the stall. I kicked his arm and he said, "It's me, Uncle Tyler." As he said that, he proceeded to crawl under my stall door. I started to climb above my stall, then my manager burst through the door as I was screaming and crying. Tyler and my manager began to fight. I called the cops. After a few seconds, Tyler was unconscious on the bathroom floor. When the cops and the EMS got there, he was cuffed and loaded up into the ambulance. He was hit with a few charges and was recently released from jail. That situation just heightened my awareness of my surroundings. Back when I was living on the streets, well, technically in my car, I would always post up about fast food restaurants because people would always give me their change or some of the food that they had recently purchased. One day I posted at the entrance of a plaza, and in that plaza the busiest place was a Chick-fil-A. Throughout the day I received a few bucks and a lot of chicken nuggets. After being out there for a few hours, I noticed a car that left a few times, and came back to park in the Chick-fil-A parking lot with covered license plates. But the person never got out of the car. Of course, I thought it was weird, but I didn't think anything of it. Throughout the day, I'd take my food to my car and I'd eat. Around 8 p.m., most of the plaza was closing up, and the traffic started to slow down. Finally, when Chick-fil-A slowed down for a few minutes, a man in the car got out and he walked up to the door of the restaurant and took a picture of the inside. A few seconds later, what looked like the manager came outside, and it looked like she was arguing with the guy. She went back inside and the man got back in his car, got on his phone, and left about 5 minutes later. FYI, I was parked about 25 feet away from the Chick-fil-A parking lot and could see everything that was going on. So a few hours go by, and the place was closed. From the outside, it looked as if the employees were cleaning up. I was trying to fall asleep, then I saw that car from earlier pull up. Then it woke me all the way up. There were 2 cars left in the parking lot. His car and some other car. And some people left. The only person I saw inside was the woman that he was talking to earlier. I saw the man get out of his car at this point. He was wearing dark colors and with gloves on, and I saw the lights get turned off inside of Chick-fil-A. The man was standing on the side of the building by a dumpster, but in a way where he can't be seen. He was in the shadows. At that point, I leaned my seat all the way back so no one could see me. The woman walked out, turned around, and began to lock the door. As soon as she turned around, that man sprinted toward her, yanked her hair, and started to yell at her as he took her back inside. I leaned up a little bit to get a better look, but I couldn't see anything. There was nothing for about 10 minutes, until the man walked back outside. He went straight to his car, but instead of driving away, he drove up to the door and went back in with his trunk left open. A few minutes later, I saw something that I would never forget. The man was dragging the woman's body, but there was no head. He struggled to get her in the trunk, but eventually he got her there. He went back in there and came out with a Chick-fil-A bag full of something and threw it in his trunk. He went back inside again for what seemed like 20 minutes. He came back out, locked up Chick-fil-A, and drove away. Someone else came back for the other car in the parking lot. A few days later, I went into a Starbucks to use the restroom, and on the news was a story about a missing woman. They showed the picture, and it was the woman who worked at Chick-fil-A. They were interviewing her husband, who was crying during the whole interview. What creeped me out is that her husband was the man that I saw with her that fateful night. I know he killed her, but he was on the news as if he didn't have anything to do with it, and like he doesn't know. Seeing that lady that night has haunted me since.